There are three silent psychological emergencies that systematically dismantle an empath's core identity, and most never see them coming until it's far too late. What makes these moments so lethal is their camouflage. They don't arrive as dramatic breakdowns or obvious crises. They slip into your life disguised as normal relationship patterns, everyday emotional exchanges, and standard social interactions. But if you are a deeply feeling person, these three thresholds have the power to erase your sense of self, dissolve your psychological borders, and lock you into cycles of self-betrayal that can persist for a lifetime. I've named them the critical junctures of empathic collapse, and my research into high-sensitivity individuals confirms that without a clear survival framework, people at these crossroads risk either complete self-loss or the tragic shutdown of their empathy merely to endure. Today, we will pinpoint these three dangerous transitions, grasp why they're so destructive, and arm you with the precise survival framework I've designed to help you cross them without self-annihilation. The pioneering psychologist Carl Jung identified a crucial reality that his peers largely ignored, that some personality configurations encounter specific existential dangers completely unrelated to conventional pathology. Born in Switzerland in 1875, he first collaborated with Sigmund Freud, but ultimately forged his own revolutionary path in understanding the human mind. His theories on psychological archetypes, the collective unconscious, and the journey of individuation built a new lens for viewing consciousness. However, his clinical work with highly sensitive individuals, those he termed feeling types, revealed these three critical emergencies, which he detailed in his 1921 work, Psychological Types, and later writings. He documented numerous cases of profoundly empathic people who hit invisible breaking points in their personal evolution. These weren't people with mental disorders. They were highly functional, compassionate individuals who had reached what Jung called thresholds of unbearable insight. In his clinical practice, he observed a consistent pattern. Sensitive people would arrive at his office at specific life junctures, often unable to articulate what was wrong, yet knowing at a soul level that something foundational had fractured. They described feeling empty, detached from their own lives, or stuck in psychological quicksand where every effort to help themselves only sank them deeper. Through years of observation, Jung identified three recurring crises. He viewed them as moments of psychic emergency. Believing how one navigated them would decide whether they achieved true individuation or remained stuck in what he called unconscious identification with others. Before we examine these three moments, we must understand Jung's concept of empathy, as it differs from today's casual usage. He described certain people as having psychic permeability. These individuals possess unusually thin boundaries between their own unconscious mind and the unconscious of others. They can detect hidden emotional currents in a room, intuit deception not through reason but through a bodily felt sense, and absorb the psychological moods of people around them like emotional antennae. Jung did not romanticize this trait. He saw it as a profound vulnerability, a type of psychological exposure that demanded sophisticated coping mechanisms just to maintain basic mental stability. 1. The awakening to one-sided exchange. The first critical moment is the dawning realization that the deep empathy you naturally offer to others is not being returned. End quote. This isn't about people being deliberately cruel. It's about their fundamental lack of capacity or willingness to meet you at your depth. Let me clarify what this moment truly is, because it's not merely noticing someone is less empathetic than you that happens constantly. This is different. This is the sudden, often shattering understanding that you've been living by a false relationship premise. You've unconsciously operated on the belief that if you just articulate your needs clearly enough, care profoundly enough, offer sufficient understanding, then others will naturally respond in kind. And in this first deadly moment, you see with absolute clarity that this is false. It will always be false. And the entire relational framework you built your life upon is fundamentally unsound. Jung documented this awakening extensively. In his case studies, he describes a patient who came to him after what she called a revelation that unmasked my entire life. She had maintained a close friendship for years, providing boundless emotional support, deep listening, and true comprehension. Then, during a genuine personal crisis, she reached out to this friend, expecting the same quality of support she had always given. What she received was a shallow reply, visible discomfort with her pain, and a hurried shift to another topic. Jung noted that the true danger was not the friend's reaction itself, but what it unveiled to his patient. This pattern had always existed. She had always been the giver, the friend had always been the receiver, but she had been so focused on giving that she never noticed the total absence of mutuality. This moment is deadly because it forces a terrifying confrontation. You might be alone in ways you never conceived. Not physically alone, but psychologically solitary. You are surrounded by relationships, yet in this moment you perceive them clearly for what they often are. Lopsided arrangements where you perform the role of understanding container, while others simply receive. Once this truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. Jung called this the withdrawal of projections. You have been projecting your own capacity for profound empathy onto others, assuming they experience connection as you do. When those projections dissolve, the revealed reality can be devastating. But here is the genuine danger: the conclusions you might draw. Jung observed that sensitive people, when facing this recognition, often swing to one of two extremes. Either they internalize the blame, thinking, "I must be unworthy of reciprocal care," or they grow cynical, thinking, "No one is capable of real empathy." Both responses, he argued, are forms of psychic inflation followed by collapse. You oscillate from believing you can manufacture reciprocity through sheer empathic force to believing reciprocity is a fantasy. Neither is accurate, and both can imprison you in damaging cycles. The survival framework for this first moment is what Jung termed conscious discernment. He wrote that the individuating person must learn to distinguish between those capable of mutual relationship and those who are not. This isn't judgment, but clarity. It's the psychological skill of recognizing varying levels of empathic capacity in different people and wisely adjusting your emotional investment. He used the analogy of a farmer who doesn't try to grow water-loving plants in arid ground. The arid ground isn't bad, it's simply the wrong environment for those specific plants. Likewise, some individuals cannot engage in mutual empathic exchange, not because they are bad people, but because they haven't cultivated that ability. The survival framework requires you to cease trying to cultivate deep connection in infertile soil and instead seek out environments where mutuality can actually flourish. Your empathy is a treasure, not a toll. Let me give you a concrete example. You have a co-worker who regularly brings you their troubles, and you listen intently, offer meaningful feedback, and provide real support. One day, you attempt to share a personal struggle and notice they respond with unsolicited advice. Quickly pivot the conversation back to themselves, or appear visibly uneasy and eager to end the interaction. The former version of you might have tried harder, explained more, or wondered what you did wrong. The survival framework guides you to do something fundamentally different. You accept the evidence. This person is not capable of or interested in a two-way exchange. This isn't a character indictment. It's simply data. And you use that data to recalibrate the relationship. You remain cordial, professional, and kind, but you stop investing your profound empathic energy where it cannot be reciprocated. Jung believed this conscious discernment was essential for psychological survival because without it, you deplete yourself trying to force mutuality where the capacity is absent, and you overlook the relationships where genuine mutual exchange is actually possible. 2. The erosion of self through constant adaptation. The second critical moment is more insidious because it occurs so gradually you often don't detect it until it's nearly complete. I call this the erosion of self through constant adaptation. This is the moment you realize you've been shape-shifting for so long, accommodating so many different people's needs and expectations, that you've lost contact with who you truly are. Your own desires, your needs, your authentic reactions, they've all been submerged beneath strata of accommodation. In this deadly moment, someone asks a simple question like, what do you actually want? Or, how do you really feel about this? And you discover with horror that you genuinely do not know. Jung witnessed this pattern repeatedly in his clinical work, especially with women, though he noted it could affect anyone with strong empathic wiring. He described what he called the persona trap. The persona, in his framework, is the social mask we wear, the role we play to function in society. It's necessary and healthy in moderation. But he observed that empathic individuals often develop what he termed multiple adaptive personas. They become so adept at reading what is required in any given situation and supplying it that they create different versions of themselves for different people and contexts. The workplace sees one version, family sees another, friends see yet another, and none are fully authentic because each has been meticulously tuned to manage others' comfort and expectations. This moment becomes deadly when you realize you've lost the connection to your authentic core entirely. Jung called this ego dissolution through over-identification with the persona. You have become the mask. There is no essential self underneath to return to because you've been adapting for so long that adaptation has become your entire identity. One of his patients described it as feeling like a ghost. I seemed solid, but if you tried to touch me, your hand passes right through. There's nothing substantial there. This image so impacted Jung that he referenced it repeatedly in later works as the perfect depiction of advanced persona identification. What makes this moment deadly isn't just the loss of self, though that is traumatic enough. It's what occurs when you attempt to reclaim yourself. Because once you recognize you've been accommodating, your instinct may be to stop entirely, to rebel against all your shape-shifting. But Jung warned, this reactive swing often creates a different problem. He described the principle of enantiodromia, the idea that any extreme inevitably transforms into its opposite. If you've been over-adapting, the reactive swing is to become rigid and inflexible. But this isn't authentic selfhood either. It's merely the shadow side of your accommodation, equally unconscious, equally disconnected from your true nature. The survival framework for this second moment is what Jung called active imagination in service of self-reclamation. This is a specific practice where you essentially dialogue with your own psyche. You create quiet space to pose yourself questions and wait for genuine answers. Not the answers you believe you should give, not the answers that would please others, but the answers that emerge from your actual self. In his therapeutic guidance, he detailed this process. You might ask yourself something as simple as, what do I genuinely enjoy? And then observe all the accommodating voices that rush in. Well, I should enjoy this because, or everyone else likes this. The protocol requires you to gently set those voices aside, and wait for the deeper, quieter voice of authentic preference. This is more difficult than it sounds because that authentic voice has been suppressed for so long it's often barely a whisper. Jung compared it to learning to hear a faint melody in a room full of noise. It takes practice, patience, and what he called a willingness to disappoint. Because as you begin reclaiming your authentic self, you will inevitably disappoint people who benefited from your accommodation. You will need to decline invitations you always accepted. You will need to express preferences that contradict what others expect. You will need to allow people to be confused or even upset by your changing behavior. This is terrifying for someone whose entire identity has been constructed around managing others' comfort. But Jung insisted this reclamation work was vital for survival. In his autobiography, he wrote about his own journey through this process. After his split with Freud, he realized he had been accommodating Freud's theoretical framework, softening his own insights to preserve the relationship. When the break occurred, he entered a period of profound disorientation. He didn't know what he actually believed versus what he had been saying to maintain the connection. It took years of active imagination, of sitting with his own psyche and awaiting authentic responses before he could articulate his own psychological theories independent of Freud's influence. He believed this process saved his psychological life and enabled his greatest contributions. Let me illustrate this survival framework in action. You're invited to a social gathering. The old accommodating pattern would have you automatically agree, then expend energy managing your own reluctance, convincing yourself to enjoy it, and performing an enthusiasm you don't feel. The survival framework has you pause and sincerely ask yourself, do I want to go to this? Not, should I go? Not, what will people think if I don't go? But do I actually want to go? And then you wait. You wait for the authentic response, which might be yes, no, or I want to go for an hour but not the whole time. And whatever that authentic response is, you honor it. You practice disappointing people when necessary. You practice letting others be confused by your evolving patterns. You practice trusting that the relationships worth keeping will adapt to your authentic self. 3. The realization of ultimate solitude. The third critical moment is perhaps the most spiritually and psychologically arduous of all. Jung called it the realization of ultimate solitude. This is distinct from the loneliness of non-reciprocity. This is the moment you grasp that no matter how deeply someone loves you, no matter how genuine the mutuality, they will never fully comprehend your internal world. There exists an unbridgeable chasm between your consciousness and theirs, and you will spend your entire life fundamentally alone within your own mind. For empathic people, this realization is especially crushing because you've lived your whole life believing that deep understanding is achievable. You've striven so hard to understand others completely, and you've unconsciously believed this depth of understanding could be returned. In this deadly moment, you understand it cannot. Jung explored this extensively in his later work. He wrote that the individual is not merely a single separate being, but also inherently a social being. As a separate being, he is utterly alone. And the more conscious he becomes of his own nature, the more this solitude unveils itself. This wasn't nihilism. He was describing what he considered a fundamental truth of consciousness, that each person's subjective experience is ultimately inaccessible to others. We can empathize, we can imagine, we can approach understanding, but we can never truly occupy another person's consciousness. For most, this is an abstract philosophical notion. But for empathic individuals, it strikes differently. You've constructed your entire psychological framework on the ability to profoundly understand others. You can feel what they feel, sense their unspoken thoughts, intuit their needs and drives. and you've unconsciously presumed others could do the same for you if you just assisted them enough, explained thoroughly enough, demonstrated how this third deadly moment is when you realize they cannot, not because they don't care, not because they aren't trying, but because the subjective nature of consciousness makes complete understanding impossible. Jung saw patients reach this moment and descend into what he termed existential despair. If complete understanding is unattainable, what is the purpose of connection? If we are all ultimately alone inside our own minds, what is the point of relationship? Some patients described feeling as if they were in a transparent prison, able to see others but never truly reach them or be reached. Others described it as speaking a native tongue that no one else could fully grasp, no matter their efforts to translate. Jung took these descriptions seriously because he had experienced this recognition himself. He wrote of periods of profound isolation where he felt the unbridgeable gap between his inner experience and anyone's capacity to comprehend it. What makes this third moment deadly is that it can lead to psychic withdrawal. If deep understanding is impossible, why endeavor? Why extend yourself? Why remain open and vulnerable? The temptation is to shut down, to cease attempting to connect, to retreat into the only consciousness you can truly know, your own. Jung viewed this as a form of psychological death, what he called premature individuation. True individuation, in his view, required both the recognition of ultimate solitude and the conscious choice to connect despite it. But reaching that integrated position demands navigating the deadly moment when the solitude first reveals itself. The survival framework for this third moment is what Jung termed the embrace of paradox. He argued that psychological maturity requires holding contradictory truths without seeking to resolve them. The paradox here is this: you are fundamentally alone in your consciousness, and genuine connection is still possible and meaningful. Both statements are true simultaneously. The survival framework requires you to stop trying to solve this paradox and instead learn to dwell within it. He described this as a shift from pursuing complete understanding to valuing partial understanding. Instead of being devastated that someone cannot fully know you, you appreciate the understanding they can offer. Instead of abandoning connection because perfect communion is impossible, you cherish the imperfect communion that is possible. Jung used the metaphor of two people on separate mountain peaks. They can never occupy the same summit, but they can signal to one another, share what they see, and feel companionship across the divide. The connection is real, even as the separation remains. True connection blooms not from being fully known, but from being fully present. Let me show this survival framework in practice. You're sharing something deeply meaningful with a loved one. You sense they aren't fully grasping it. They're trying, they're listening. But a gap persists between your experience and their comprehension. The former you might have tried harder to explain, felt frustrated by the gap, or decided the relationship was deficient. The survival framework guides you to do something different. You appreciate the understanding that is present while accepting the gap. You might say, I sense I'm not conveying this in a way you can fully receive. And that's okay. I value you listening. You release them from the burden of total comprehension and release yourself from the burden of perfect expression. This survival framework also requires what Jung called self-companionship. If you are fundamentally alone in your consciousness, you must become good company for yourself. You need to cultivate a relationship with your own psyche that is rich and deep enough to sustain you. He described this as developing an internal dialogue. You learn to observe your own experience with curiosity and compassion. You become interested in your own reactions, gentle with your own struggles, appreciative of your own complexity. You cease abandoning yourself in the quest for external validation and instead provide yourself with the understanding you've been seeking from others. Jung believed this self-companionship was not self-absorption but necessity. He wrote, "Whoever looks outside dreams. Whoever looks inside awakens." The survival framework for the third deadly moment requires this awakening, this inward turn, not as a retreat from connection, but as a foundation for sustainable relationship. Because when you've accepted your ultimate solitude and learned to be good company for yourself, you can connect with others from a place of wholeness, not desperate need. You aren't seeking someone to complete you or fully understand you. You're seeking fellow travelers who are also fundamentally alone but choose to walk beside you nonetheless. Tempered empathy, the outcome of survival. Now, here's what Jung observed about those who successfully navigate all three of these critical moments. They emerge with what he called tempered empathy. This differs from the raw, untempered empathy they began with. Tempered empathy is empathy refined through the fires of these crises. It is empathy that includes self-protection, discernment, and realistic expectations. He wrote that this form of empathy is ultimately more valuable than its naive counterpart because it is sustainable. It doesn't lead to burnout or resentment. It lets you remain open and caring while preserving your psychological integrity. He described tempered empathy as having key traits. It is selective. You don't extend profound empathic energy to everyone uniformly. You practice the conscious discernment of the first framework. It is boundaried. You maintain contact with your authentic self even while understanding others. You practice the self-reclamation of the second framework. It is realistic. You value partial understanding and imperfect connection while accepting ultimate solitude. You practice the paradox embrace of the third framework. Jung believed people who develop this tempered empathy become what he termed wounded healers. This archetype represents someone who has been genuinely injured, has faced real psychological peril, but has transformed that wounding into wisdom. They can aid others not from naive optimism, but from hard-won understanding. They know the deadly moments because they've survived them, and their survival creates a map for others. Let me synthesize this with a later reflection of Jung's that captures the core of these survival frameworks. In a letter, he wrote to someone struggling with empathic overwhelm, "You cannot rescue anyone. You can only illuminate the path with your own lived example. And to illuminate the path, you must first endure the darkness yourself." These experiences you are undergoing, as painful as they are initiations. They are initiating you into authentic selfhood, into realistic relationship, into the profound paradoxes of human existence. Do not attempt to bypass them. Do not anesthetize yourself to them. Move through them with as much awareness as you can muster. And on the other side, you will find yourself fundamentally changed. This is the ultimate message about these three critical moments. They are not anomalies to avoid or illnesses to cure. They are initiations into psychological maturity. The awakening to one-sided exchange initiates you into discernment. The erosion of self through adaptation initiates you into authentic selfhood. The realization of ultimate solitude initiates you into realistic connection and self-companionship. Each critical moment, when navigated with awareness and the appropriate survival framework, becomes a gateway to a more integrated, more individuated version of yourself. But Jung also cautioned that these moments can be fatal if navigated unconsciously. He wrote of psychic death, which is distinct from physical death but equally tragic. Psychic death is when a person is biologically alive but psychologically deceased. They go through life's motions but have lost connection to their authentic core. their capacity for genuine relationship, their sense of meaning. He believed that empathic individuals who encounter these three critical moments without a survival framework often end in this state of psychic death. They either shut down their empathy entirely, becoming hardened and defensive, or they remain in patterns of self-abandonment that gradually erode their sense of self until nothing remains. This is why he stressed the importance of consciousness during these moments. You must recognize what is happening as it occurs. You must name, I am in the first critical moment, or this is the self-erosion I was warned about, or I am facing the realization of ultimate solitude. Naming the moment gives you agency. It lets you consciously apply the survival framework rather than reacting unconsciously from fear or pain. He also emphasized the value of witnessing. He wrote about the necessity of having someone who can hold space for your process without trying to fix it or persuade you out of it. This could be a therapist, a trusted friend, or even a relationship with your own higher self through journaling or meditation. The witness doesn't solve the critical moment for you, but they anchor you while you move through it. They remind you that your experience is real, valid, and survivable. I'll conclude with a story Jung shared about his own navigation of what we would call a critical moment. After his break with Freud, he entered his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of intense psychological upheaval lasting years. He experienced visions, heard voices, and questioned his sanity. He was confronting all three critical moments simultaneously. The recognition that his relationship with Freud lacked reciprocity, the realization he had been accommodating Freud's theories at the expense of his own insights, and the profound isolation of developing ideas no one around him could grasp. He later called this the most dangerous time of his life, not due to external threats, but because of the internal dissolution he was undergoing. What saved him, he wrote, was his decision to consciously engage with the process rather than flee from it. He developed active imagination specifically to navigate this period. He created a red book to document his visions and dialogues with his unconscious. He maintained his daily routines and professional work even while undergoing profound internal transformation. And crucially, he trusted there was meaning in the chaos, that he was being initiated into something rather than simply disintegrating. Years later, he could see that this deadly period had been necessary for his most important contributions. The survival frameworks he forged for himself became the frameworks he offered his patients. So if you find yourself in one of these three critical moments right now, if you're awakening to one-sidedness, feeling the erosion of self, or facing ultimate solitude, know this: you are not losing your mind. You are not defective or broken. You are being initiated. You stand at a threshold demanding you develop new psychological capacity, discernment, authentic selfhood, realistic connection, self-companionship. These are not easy capacities to cultivate. The process will be uncomfortable, sometimes agonizing, but it is absolutely possible to survive these moments and emerge more whole, more individuated, more genuinely yourself than before. The survival frameworks are not quick fixes or simple tricks. They are blueprints for the conscious navigation of genuinely difficult psychological terrain. They require courage, patience, and a willingness to stay present with discomfort. But they work. Jung's decades of clinical experience proved they work, and the transformed lives of those who consciously navigated these critical moments prove they work. You can survive this. You can move through these initiations and emerge with tempered empathy, authentic selfhood, and the capacity for genuine connection that honors both your empathic gift and your need for psychological integrity. Your journey is not toward an end, but toward a more complete beginning. And if this perspective has brought you value, if it has illuminated part of your path, then please support this channel by liking this video. It genuinely helps us grow and continue creating content for the Winds of Thought community. Thank you for watching.